What is new with due diligence in 2023?
So the game has changed regarding due diligence. A couple of years ago, the market was absolutely crazy, and we were getting 25, 50, 100. We even had $500,000 due diligence money, non-refundable money written to the seller, and those numbers are changing. So there's still a shortage of inventory, and when someone's excited about a property, they're going to throw down some due diligence money. That is money that is written to the seller as compensation for the seller taking the property off the market. So, of course, sellers want the most due diligence money as possible, but we're not getting these giant numbers like we used to. I mean, we still every now and then we'll get some 25s or 30s or whatever, but it's much more common now to get like $5,000 or $10,000 in due diligence money. So that number has dropped drastically from a couple years ago. But people don't understand what due diligence means. Due diligence is it's your time to figure out whether or not you want to buy this house. And in North Carolina, due diligence period means you can walk away for any or no reason. So you have to have reasonable dates. Right now, reasonable dates inside 30 is probably not reasonable. Outside 45 is not too reasonable. That's for due diligence. That's enough time to inspect this property. So if you say, "Oh, we're going to do 1 week of due diligence," you're not going to get everything you need to done in this market. But if you're not going to do inspections, maybe 7 days of due diligence is enough. But the norm right now is about 30. And then if you're trying to drag on a contract and everything, you say, "Oh, I want 60 days of due diligence." That's not reasonable either. You're having the seller keep their property off the market for 2 months. They're probably going to want to get paid for that. They're going to want to be compensated for it. And why would you want 60 days? That's probably an excessive amount of time. Doesn't mean we don't see them or don't have them. Doesn't mean we don't do a 7 or 10 day. Doesn't mean we don't do a 50 or 60 day. But the norm right now is between 30 and 45 days. So what do you have to get done during that due diligence period? You have to get all the inspections that you want. You want the buildings inspected. You probably want the water inspected. You want a termite inspection. You might want a radon inspection. If there's a septic, you're going to want that inspected. And if it comes to it, you might need a structural or a chimney or an HVAC inspection. So all those inspections have to happen within that time period. The other thing that has to happen if you're going to get some kind of financing or a mortgage, you're going to have an appraisal too. You're better off getting your inspections done before you get your appraisal, but you're spinning some plates. So you want to spend the money on inspections. If the inspections come out really bad, you probably don't want to fork up another $400 to $600 for an appraisal. So there's some timelines that you have to follow. And if you're utilizing a VA loan, it's a different kind of appraisal. It's a little bit of an appraisal and an inspection combined. So you get all these inspections done, and now you have round 2 of negotiations with a seller. Well, a lot of these QC agents, your due diligence date is Thursday at 5 o'clock, and they're shooting you their request Thursday at 3:30. That's not going to give the seller enough time to negotiate, think about it. It doesn't give the seller time to get estimates for those repairs. So really, if you want to do a solid for your buyer, give the seller enough time to respond. So you're better off like somewhere between about 3 to 5 days before the due diligence date. Give your request to the seller so they at least have some amount of time to get estimates. Maybe you don't want the seller to do the repair, so maybe you're negotiating money instead. Wouldn't you rather be in control of your repairs than the seller's going to do it the most economically way they can? And the buyer might want to do it the best way, or they might want to make some improvements. So sometimes it's better to negotiate money instead of repairs. I know this is going to get some blowback, but a lot of the Raleigh, Cary, Durham, Chapel Hill agents say it has to be by a general contractor. It has to be by a licensed this. It has to be a licensed. Look, if it's an electrical issue and it requires a permit, by all means, yes, use a licensed electrician, okay? But I mean, if it's a simple electric repair that doesn't require a permit or whatever, and the seller says, I worked on a sub as the electrical engineer. I can replace this GFCI. I mean, you're really putting an unnecessary burden on the seller to say, we get a loose spigot outside of for the hose on the outside of the house. The mortar breaks and there's a loose spigot. It says that repair must be done by a licensed plumber. That's just not realistic. You're going to pay $300 when you can pay a handyman like $50, and that's not something that requires a permit or whatever. So you can get cutesy, and my company requires that it has to be licensed this or whatever, but you might end up getting less in repairs because you're putting a big burden on the seller. The biggest one that we get all the time is crawl space. Okay, so this is North Carolina. We build most of our houses on a crawl space. This is not the driest climate in the world. We're constantly getting moisture or water intrusion in our crawl space. It's devastating. You hear about it as standing water, mold. Everybody gets scared of mold and everything. Almost all houses do have mold. But if you have a severe water intrusion underneath the house and there's structural rot, that's a big deal. But sometimes we'll just have a little bit of salting effervescence and a little bit of evidence where there's been some water with a severe rainstorm, and then the cutesy agent says the seller has to get a licensed crawl space technician in there to redo the crawl space. We're not talking thousands of dollars. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars. The last two I've done have been $40,000 and $50,000.
I didn't even know there was such a thing.
Oh yeah. Well, and it's. I'm sure there's some reputable crawl space companies out there, but one of the things that the crawl spaces are doing, these companies are doing, is not only are we going to fix it for you, but we're going to give you a warranty. So it's a $20,000 repair that ends up being a $40,000 bill because they're giving you that warranty on top of it. And we're literally talking $40,000 or $50,000. The other thing too is, these guys are seeing a situation here. Oh yeah, we could fix your crawl space, but there's a chance that, the mold might come back or the water might come back. What you really need is a sealed crawl space. And that's where they're getting the 40 and 50,000. So, North Carolina is generally a crawl space situation. You're gonna scare the buyer, you're gonna scare the seller. That is a very, very expensive repair. And the two other things that we get all the time, three things: roof, HVAC, and windows. Each one of those could be $10,000 to $20,000. You get a new roof, 10 to 20 easy. New HVAC, 10 to 20 easy, and windows, 10 to 20 easy. Okay. Well, you saw the house. You knew it wasn't a new roof. Okay. But then the inspector comes and says, "Oh, there's only 3 years left in this roof, or 5 years left in this roof," and you're like panicking and everything. You're like, "I'm gonna make that seller buy me a new roof." You probably don't have that much negotiation in the deal or whatever. Like buyers have to have realistic expectations. The agents representing those buyers have to. You saw the house, you saw how old the roof was. The inspector comes and says, it says that scary stuff, but is it performing its intended function? Is it a good solid roof? Does it have any rot? Are there any active leaks? How's the attic look? There are things where you can calm people down and everything, but the expectation of a new roof right now is probably not going to happen. Having said that, that's one of the big changes in due diligence right now too. A couple years ago, people were saying, "As is, I just want the house. I don't care. I'm not going to ask you for any repairs, blah, blah, blah." Well, now the MO is we get you under contract, and then we have that round 2 of negotiations. And the buyers are being really, really tough. Their interest rates a couple years ago were 3.25. Now they're 7.5. So, they're thinking about how much money they have to spend every month. They're locked into a contract, and they are really being a lot tougher with the sellers right now. And the other thing that I think is real important is for buyers and sellers, you don't want that due diligence date so close to the settlement date. So, we were talking before 30 to 45 days of due diligence. I like a minimum of a week, but probably 2 weeks between due diligence and the settlement date. After the due diligence dates, negotiations are over, the sellers have to pack. They have to move. They have to it's really going to happen right now. And a lot of times we'll get these offers where the due diligence date and the settlement date are 3 days apart. That's not giving anybody enough time. So make sure there's good separation between those two.